Taming the High Cost of College with Brad Baldridge, episode number 1.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Welcome to the first episode of Taming the High Cost of College. My name is Brad Baldridge, and I will be the host for this show. If you're asking yourself questions like, how much can we afford for college? Will we qualify for student aid? How do the loans work? What schools should we be visiting? What's a good fit school for my students? How is this all going to come together? How do we deal with multiple kids in college at the same time? If you're asking those kinds of questions, you're in the right place. Over the next few weeks and months, I hope to answer all those questions and more as I issue a weekly podcast about taming the high cost of college. Now, this podcast is going to focus on what I will call late-stage college planning. And late-stage college planning typically is families with high school students. So how is this podcast going to work? It's my goal to issue a new podcast once a week covering all the various college planning topics. Now, some weeks I hope to interview experts in the various fields like test planning and ACT test prep, college admissions, essay writing, and those types of things. I will also provide financial information. How does the financial aid system work? What are the types and kinds of student loans and those types of things? And then I'd like to spend a portion of each podcast answering your questions. So I would appreciate it if you have questions, if you'd give me some feedback. You can go directly to my website at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. And there's a record a voicemail spot, a couple places on the website where you can send me a voicemail, and I will then use that voicemail here on the podcast. Or you can also interact with me at our Facebook page. And you can get to the Facebook page by going to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/Facebook. So who is Brad? Let me give you a little bit about my history, just so you kind of know the angle that I'm coming from. I've been a financial planner since 1995, and I've operated a business called Baldridge Wealth Management. In about 2005, I discovered that a lot of the clients I was working with were struggling with how to pay for college, what types of loans to take, and so forth. And as I delved into it, I realized that there was a whole lot of things that families should and could be doing to reduce their overall cost of college, to make college go more smoothly. And I launched a second business called Baldridge College Solutions. Baldridge College Solutions helps families figure out how to pay for college efficiently. We go through things like financial aid, visiting schools, understanding the loans that are available, how to choose the right types and kinds of investments, and how to make the whole process go a little bit smoother, save money, and ultimately have a good outcome. So at Baldridge College Solutions, our goal is to save time, save money, reduce stress, and hopefully have a better outcome. Now, the challenge at Baldridge College Solutions that I'm having is one-on-one, I can only help a small number of families. I think I have about 35 graduating seniors this year, and I'm on track for a similar number next year. But there's literally millions of people out there that need more and better information about how college works and how to pay for college. So I decided to launch this podcast to spread the word. My goal is to help at least 1,000 people over this next school year improve their college situation, both financially as well as just doing the right things at the right time. So if you're enjoying what you're listening to, hopefully you'll spread the word to other parents that you know, perhaps even to your guidance counselors at school or other professionals that you interact with. All right, well, that's enough about me. Let's talk more about the college planning process. College planning can be divided into 2 stages. There's early stage planning. If you've got a baby or a 2-year-old or 6-year-old, and you're saying, I need to save for college because I think that's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 20 years. That's early stage planning. There's also late stage planning, which is the focus of this podcast, which is dealing with the whole process of college. Whether you've saved or not, you're going to have to do late stage planning. So I've recorded a piece here that's coming up that where we're going to cover all aspects of the late stage planning in kind of an overview fashion, all the various areas that you need to be working in. It's my plan for this podcast to cover the overview in this episode and then generate another 8 to 10 episodes where I cover each major category in more detail. So I hope to have podcasts coming shortly on things like student loans, financial aid process, the admissions process, as well as interjecting some interviews and additional information. So as we launch this podcast, I'm going to try and get kind of the core college planning out to you in the next 10 episodes or so, where you have a roughly 10 podcasts covering the basics. That'll help us get on the same page. You'll learn the terminology, all the different areas you need to be thinking about. And then from there, we'll delve into even more advanced planning, things like tax planning and other things that you can be doing, as well as talk to experts and provide additional information. All right, so let's focus in on late stage college planning. First of all, what is late stage college planning? Well, late stage college planning is the planning that families should be doing when you have a high school student. In other words, you may have a freshman or sophomore, which would be an ideal time to get started, but most families haven't. But you certainly need to get to work if you have a junior or senior. Now, late stage college planning is something you're going to have to do no matter how well you did your early stage planning. As an example, some families have saved a large pot of money for college, and now in the late stage planning, it's time to figure out, well, how to spend that money efficiently and look at the bigger picture of things like, well, what schools can we afford and so forth. Now, a lot of families are on the other end of that spectrum. They may not have saved anything at all. Well, the reality there is a whole lot of kids still go to college even though they don't have the big pot of money to pay the high price of college. So now planning is figuring out, well, what are we going to do instead of that pot of money? It's too late for that part of the plan. Now we're going to focus on all the other things. And then also you need to understand the whole late stage process. You know, what is it going to take to be accepted at colleges? Are you going to pursue scholarships and so forth? And we'll get into those details in a minute. So why do you want to do late stage college planning? Well, the first thing you need to understand is college is getting very expensive. It's a much bigger deal in the family budget now than it was for parents out there when you went to school. I can remember when I was in college, I was able to work hard for the summer. And now granted, I worked really hard, often 60, 70 hours a week. But I was then able to pay a good portion of my tuition and room and board from the money I saved through the summer. And with some small loans, it all came together relatively easily. Now, in addition, I was also at a relatively low-cost school. But that's the way a lot of parents were able to do it. But the game has changed. The game has changed in a lot of ways. As an example, how many colleges did you apply to? A whole lot of parents out there only applied to 1, maybe 2 colleges. And they didn't spend a lot of time working at it. They didn't do a lot of visiting. They kind of said, I'm going to go to this college here. They sent in their application and off they went. Another example, how hard did you work on your college testing and ACT prep and so forth, or SAT, depending on where you lived at the time? I know for me, I took the ACT, and my ACT plan, or at least my prep for my ACT, was to sharpen a couple of pencils and get a good night's sleep. What are your students going to be doing? Now, in a lot of cases, for those that aren't aware, many students take the ACT multiple times, and they do some sort of prep or studying in between. So understanding what you're up against is certainly part of the situation. Now, when we say college is getting more expensive, I mean, in general, life is getting more complicated as well. If you look at things like, baseball. Let's assume when you were a kid, you were 14, 15, and you said, I'd like to go play some baseball. Generally speaking, you went down to the baseball field on a Saturday morning. A bunch of your friends may or may not be there. Whoever was there, you kind of had a pickup game and you played some baseball. And that was that. Now, of course, how do kids today play baseball? Well, now they join a league and the parents volunteer their time to organize the league and sell refreshments. And it gets to be a much more complicated system where there's fees to be paid and the parents have to deliver the kids and watch them and pick them up. And life is just more complex, and college is no different. So let's move into the details of late stage college planning. So, not only is life complex, but I mentioned that college is expensive. Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, I've got a bunch of sample prices here I'm going to read to you real quick. But let's talk just about the state schools. I've got 5 or 6 state schools here. The state school that my kids would attend right here in Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin, for an in-state student is $24,100. Out of state, it's $40,400. LSU, $22,300. In-state, $40,300 out of state. San Diego State, $26,400 in-state, $37,000 out of state. Ohio State, $23,000 in-state, $39,000 out. UC Berkeley, $33,000 and $56,000. Texas Tech, $22,800 and $33,500. Sunny University at Buffalo, $20,300 and $32,200. So those are the state schools. They have obviously an in-state price for residents of that state, and they also have an out-of-state price. Now, it's important to realize that all the numbers I just gave you are what we would call cost of attendance. Now, that's a technical term, but essentially that's the whole cost of college. So that includes tuition, room and board, books, fees, beer and pizza. There's even a little bit of money in there for the spending money of a typical college student. So that's a typical total cost. Now, every student's different depending on what type of dorm room you choose and what meal plan you choose and how much spending money they actually need to spend. But that number is a published number by all the colleges, and it's based on some averages and some information that they provide. Now, all those were just the state schools. Let's talk a little bit about the private schools. The private schools can be much more expensive, especially the large name brand schools. As an example, Harvard is $59,950. NYU is $63,500. Georgetown, $62,500. Notre Dame, $60,000. Carleton, $60,000. Baylor in Texas, $53,000. Marquette right here in my hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, $48,400. Benedict College in South Carolina, $29,600. So now we're getting to some colleges that perhaps you've never heard of, and some of the lower cost colleges are more regional or local colleges, but they may be a good fit for some. Crichton in Nebraska, $48,000. Fresno Pacific in California, $37,900. Flagler College in Florida, $29,900. Now that's just a very quick sample of the various prices out there. There are approximately 4,000 colleges, and the prices are all over the board. But as a kind of a quick summary, the average state school flagship state schools are running in the $22,000, $24,000 typically. Some are more expensive than that, obviously. Some of the more regional state schools might be in the $20,000 or even $15,000, depending on the state and how their budgets are going. And then the private schools, again, range from probably $30,000 to $60,000, with the elite private schools and the name brand schools being in the $50,000 to $60,000 range, and some of the smaller regional schools potentially offering a lower cost at, say, $35,000, $40,000, $45,000. So that's the kind of prices we're dealing with, and that's why I think late-stage college planning is a much more important piece of the puzzle. And yes, and for those of you that are wondering, that price is per year. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's involved in late-stage planning. I help families do a lot of late-stage planning, and I've kind of boiled it down and studied it a little bit. And what I've come up with is that late-stage college planning is really a group of plans that you kind of put together. So it's an amalgamation of 5 or 6 other plans, maybe 7 or 8, that you work on kind of parallel. So the main areas that you're going to work on are college finances, college selection, college testing, academics, career and life planning, admissions, scholarships, and for the athletes out there, you'd also work on athletics. So those are the 7 or 8 areas that you would be working on. So let's talk about each of these plans, micro plans that would be part of late stage college planning. The big one is college finances. Trying to figure out your college finances can be a challenge. And within college finances, we have things like financial aid planning, filling out the financial aid forms, need-based aid, understanding the offer letters and the appeal process, filling out the FAFSA, all the different saving and investment strategies you might pursue, tax planning and tax breaks that are associated with college, Overall cash flow. How can we afford to pay for college? Multiple children. If we've got 3 or 4 children that we're dealing with and we have to pay college, 4 times, we might have to do it differently than families that only have 1 student. So college finances is a big topic, and we will break that out, and we'll be doing a lot of podcasts on all the various pieces of college financing. Then we have college selection. How do you find the college that's a good fit for your student? I often ask families, are you interested in the best school or the best school for your student? In a lot of cases, it's a lot different. There are rankings out there where people say, well, this school, based on this report, is ranked higher than that school. And that certainly is a piece of the puzzle. But I think for a lot of families, you're really looking for a college where your student is going to thrive. Because if they do well at a school that's not ranked as high, or they fail out of a highly ranked school, obviously they're better off where they're a good fit. So we need to work hard on picking the right schools. And how do we do that? What's involved? College visits, college fairs, negotiating with the schools, learning more about them, visiting with alumni, all the different things on how do you pick a good college. Then we have college testing. And again, here the game has changed. Most families or most students are going to have to be taking either the ACT or the SAT. And some families may be using both the tests. In addition to that, there's also some tests that you may be taking at your high school. There's the PLAN test and the PSAT test. So understanding all the different tests that are available, understanding which ones you should take. Are you going to do any prep in between tests, or are you going to take it multiple times? For some students, taking the test once and being done is fine. For a lot of other students, we perhaps need to put a more robust plan in place. Maybe you'll take the test twice. Maybe you'll do online tutoring, whatever it might be. Then we have academics. Taking the right courses in high school in order to be eligible at the colleges you're interested in. Or should you be taking AP courses, and how many? What about your GPA? Is your GPA strong enough for the colleges that you're considering? Class rank, another big issue. Some high schools no longer disclose class rank. So what do we do about that? What are the colleges doing about that? Career and life planning. What kind of majors is your student considering? What career path do they think they're on? As well as learning life skills. I think there's kind of 2 camps out there when it comes to college planning and majors. There's the students out there that are focused and say, well, I know what I want to study. Ever since 10th grade, I've been interested in nursing. That's my plan. I'm going to go to school to be a nurse, or I'm going to go to school to be an engineer, or I really like business and finance. I'm going to pursue starting my own business at some point, so I want to get involved in that. But there's another camp, which is the undecided student. Undecided is the most popular major out there. About half the students I work with are very focused and know which direction they're going, and the other half generally are more undecided, and they're not exactly sure how to deal with it. Now, what's interesting and what I found is if parents were undecided when they went to college, they're a lot more likely to understand the dilemma that the student is in. Where I see a little bit of conflict sometimes is when mom and dad always knew what they wanted to be when they grow up, so they picked a path, they got on the path, and they pursued the path. They have a harder time understanding when a student is undecided. So if you happen to be one of those parents where, you always knew you wanted to be an engineer or something, and now you have a student who isn't as focused and doesn't have a direction, try and be a little more understanding, give them a little bit of slack on that. Find ways to help them make some good decisions. Admissions. What is it going to take to get accepted at the colleges you're considering? In a lot of cases, it's going to be applications. In most cases, applications. But in addition to that, will you need essays and recommendation letters? Are the colleges you're considering going to accept the Common App? Are you interested in going early decision or early action? So there's all kinds of decisions to be made as far as the process is concerned on the admissions as well. Then we have scholarship. Do you intend to pursue scholarship? If I asked you, are you interested in a scholarship? Most people say, well, absolutely, I'd love to get scholarships. If I change the question and say, are you interested in doing the work to win scholarships? Now, all of a sudden, it's a different question. And it's like, well, if I have to work for scholarships, maybe I'm not going to pursue them as much as I thought. But there's all kinds of different scholarships. The word scholarship has a number of different meanings depending on the context. So we will get into a scholarship. So there will definitely be a podcast coming up about scholarships. But we need to understand the types. There's scholarships from the institution that you are attending. In other words, if you're going to Notre Dame may have scholarships for you, or Marquette, or Harvard, or wherever you're considering, especially the private schools. But in addition to that, there's scholarships from outside agencies. The alumni groups have scholarships. Your local high schools have scholarships. There's scholarships all over the place. Now, there's different types and kinds, and some of them are easy to apply for. Some of them are a lot more work. So we really need to understand how much we're going to put into scholarships. And then finally, athletics. Athletics is an additional piece of the puzzle if you believe you've got a student who might be playing in college. Whether it's Division I, they're a superstar athlete and they're on their way to the big leagues, so to speak, or whether you've got, which is obviously a lot more common, a student who just wants to continue their athletic career for another, 2, 3, 4 years if they can. They're doing well in high school. Maybe they're playing tennis or they're rowing or doing some non-revenue sport that is not likely to give them a whole lot of scholarships, but perhaps they can use that athletics to get accepted at a school. So when it comes to athletics, athletes can use their skills to win actual athletic scholarships, but they also can use their skills to get a little bit of leverage and maybe get accepted at a school that they normally wouldn't be accepted at. Or perhaps continue their athletic career because that's what they enjoy. And a lot of times, I have parents say, well, they're going to be too busy dealing with athletics. I think that's a kind of a trite answer. I think you need to really look into. It depends on the school they're at and what the requirements are. But most students spend some time doing what they enjoy. And if athletics is what your student enjoys, there's certainly some benefits to being a college athlete. You've got instant group of friends. In a lot of cases and a lot of schools, the athletic team is pushed by the coach to do well academically. They're provided additional services and tutoring potentially. So there's a lot of benefits to athletics. And of course, there's also the negative, which is in a lot of cases, it does take a lot of your time and it is a commitment. So studying and understanding athletics is another piece of the puzzle. So there you have it. There's the main categories. Now, what's interesting is these plans need to be integrated with each other. As an example, if in your college selection, you start talking about very elite private schools that are very selective, that may change how hard you work on your college testing. It certainly will change how hard you work on your admissions application and essays, because in order to get accepted at a selective school, you may need to do better in a lot of areas. Your admissions applications need to be top-notch. Your academics need to be top-notch. So you need to have a strong GPA. And your testing needs to be top-notch. So all three of those things are kind of dictated by the college selection process. If you're thinking about attending school in a faraway state, let's say you live in Texas and you're considering the East Coast, or you live in Florida and you want to go out to California, the visit process is going to be rather time-consuming. So that visit plan needs to be integrated with the colleges that you're interested in. And then the testing and the applications and so forth. So, and then through all of this is, well, what can the family afford? What is mom and dad willing to spend? What does the student have available? Is the student willing to take on a large amounts of debt to make it happen? So all these things kind of interrelate and need to be kind of worked on, and often in a parallel system. So that's what college planning is all about, late stage college planning. And again, that's just a broad overview of late stage college planning. I will put this outline in the show notes, as well as some of the data that I provided earlier. All right. Here ends the discussion about what late stage planning is. We're going to move on now. We're going to start talking about the next segment I plan on having in most of my podcasts. The next segment is what I call Brad Recommends. The purpose of this segment is to make you aware of various products, services, websites, good books, all the good stuff that I find out there that I think parents of college-bound kids should be reading, getting involved in, whatever it might be. So without further ado, here we go.
The latest tips, tricks, and tools you can use today. This is Brad Recommends on Taming the High Cost of College.
The first recommendation I'm going to make is a book. It's a book by Lauren Pope, and it's called Colleges That Change Lives: 40 Schools That Will Change the Way You Think About Colleges. Now, this book was written many, many years ago and rewritten, and I'm talking about the 2006 edition. It has a bright orange cover. Now, this book, when it was written by a Lauren Pope, who is a college admissions expert, and he wrote this book for families that were struggling with what colleges to consider and what colleges might be a good fit for your student. And this is the rise of, during the time of this book, it was the rise of U.S. News and World Reports and the college rankings and the pressures on students to get into the best school. So Lauren wrote this book as kind of his opinion about the Ivies and what you might be looking for in a school. The format of the book is written such that the first 40 or 50 pages is about college selection philosophy and kind of Lauren Pope's take on what you should be looking for and why. And then the rest of the book, another 200 pages or so, is about the 40 colleges that he kind of picks and showcases in the book. The focus of this book is very liberal arts oriented. So if your student is looking at engineering or something like that, where the philosophy might be interesting, the schools that are highlighted as an example may not fit well with a technical degree like nursing or math or engineering. But the philosophy of how to choose a school, Lauren's basic philosophy in this book is that the Ivy League, although highly sought after, may not be a good fit for all students. He talks about how you might be able to get more and better personal attention. Some of the schools that he's highlighting. He talks about what the goal of the professors at some colleges are compared to others. So again, it's a kind of a rebuttal to the U.S. News and World Reports where they're saying, well, these are the great schools. Everybody should be going to these great schools. Look at how highly ranked they are. And Lauren's answer to that is, yes, they may be highly ranked, but are you getting the education you think you're paying for? So if you want to get a kind of a second opinion about the rankings and the pressure for the high-end schools and that kind of stuff, I think this is a great book to be reading. I think if you're struggling with how to choose a college and not sure if you want to go to the Ivies or if you want to go to a high-end school or a low-end school and you're not sure which direction to go, I think looking into this book may make sense. Certainly read the first 40 or 50 pages. I've actually been giving this exact book out to clients of mine when I've learned that they're struggling with college ranking or how to choose the best school and that kind of thing. And I encourage them to read at least the first 40 pages and then read, about 5 or 6 schools. You don't certainly have to, it's not a cover to cover kind of book where you're going to read all about every school necessarily. You certainly can, but for a lot of people, you can open it up and then pick out the colleges that you're interested in and learn a bit more. Now, just so you're aware, the book has been rewritten. It looks like it was re-released in 2012. Lauren Pope actually passed away, I believe, in 2008. So the latest version is written or edited by someone new that's editing his work. I read a couple of the reviews on Amazon. It appears that in the editing process, they may have changed a little bit. A couple of the reviews have said that they've read both the 2006 edition and the newest edition, and they were still recommending the 2006 edition. Another thing to realize is the 40 schools that were listed in Lauren's book realized that they had a golden opportunity. So they've actually formed a coalition where they market themselves together and they use this whole book as a way for them to market and put on college fairs. And there's a whole website around it and all that kind of stuff. You're certainly welcome to check that kind of stuff out if the book resonates with you. But that's the first recommendation I'm going to make. Again, Colleges That Change Lives by Lauren Pope. The 2006 edition is the one I'd recommend. It's available used. You might be able to find it at a library. I've been buying them used at Amazon.com and sending them home with my clients. And I will also provide a link to the book on my website, so you can then click through to Amazon if you'd like. Well, here ends my very first podcast. Hopefully you've enjoyed listening to what I have to say about college planning. There's a whole bunch more to come. I plan on, again, doing some focus podcasts in the near future on things like financial aid, scholarships, student loans, college visits, and a whole bunch more. So please stay tuned. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, you can get more at iTunes, where you can subscribe to my podcast. You can also go to my website and listen to each individual episode there as well at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. If you have any questions that you'd like to be answered either on the podcast or just in a reply on Facebook, please visit our Facebook page. You can get to that through our website at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/Facebook. Or you can also record a question and we will play it on a future podcast and give you the answer there as well. So please send me your feedback. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this very first podcast. I will be producing many more. I also have copies of some radio shows that I've produced over the last year or so. I was a guest in WISN with Jerry Bott, where we went through a lot of the same material that I'm going to be covering in this podcast. So go ahead, and if you want more information quickly, you can go there. There's about 6 radio shows on various topics. The notes on those radio shows are also available at my website. And also sign up for our free newsletter and mailing list, and we will keep you informed as things grow and progress. So visit my website, stay tuned for more, subscribe at iTunes, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.